Hi, I'm DJ Ware, and this time on the Cybergizmo, we're going to be taking a look at computer security, at least from the standpoint of an introductory view. And the next time, we'll talk about some of the tools that can be used to help you to determine the security level of your system, whether or not you have at least done the minimal kinds of things to protect yourself. Of course, that job is never done. But let's take a look at some of the meanings before we get too deep into talking about computer security itself. It has other names. It's called IT security. It is a part of cybersecurity, although cybersecurity is a much broader aspect of security. It encompasses other things besides just the computer systems themselves. Computer security definition, those are controls that are put in place in order to maintain the confidentiality and availability of your systems, and also to make sure that those that are authenticating in are who they say they are. So that includes all components of the system. The computer security is really intended to protect the information system from theft or damage, and that includes hardware, software, and data itself. Computer security is supposed to protect from disruption or misdirection of services that particular system is providing. And the bad news is that when security works, nothing happens. And so your management team might think, wow, we don't have any problems with security, so what do we need you guys for? So one of my responses to that has always been, well, this boardroom looks pretty clean. Why don't you fire all your janitors? Obviously, you don't need those either. Usually they kind of get the idea. Some of the threats that we see, these are the more common ones. This is certainly not all of them, but it is the most common one. Backdoors, being able to access or to provide account escalation by gaining access to the shell as hopefully root, as that is the intent. The denial of service is still around, and it is in fact growing. Direct access attacks are being able to directly infiltrate your systems on the inside. Eavesdropping is being able to exfiltrate data either through the keyboard or your network or your applications or your database. Fileless is increasing, and those leave a very small footprint. They use utilities within the operating system or operating system drivers themselves to gain access, and those are also known as living off the LAN attacks. Multi-vector or polymorphic attacks mask their signature, so they're harder to detect. Phishing will try to entice your user to click on an email attachment or go to a website that delivers malware into their system, and that malware then spreads to the rest of your equipment on that particular network. Social engineering is as simple as looking up people's names in your corporate phone book and then impersonating those people to either get a password reset or a new encryption key or something because you need help right away with something. Spoofing is actually either acting as a service that you are not, or acting as a user who you are not. So it's basically trying to tell the system that you are somebody or something else that is a legitimate, should be treated as a legitimate user. Tampering is altering the security policies or defeating parts of the system in order to gain access. It could be as simple as breaking into a door on the side of your building. Trends, let's talk about those for a minute. So we'll go through a number of companies that have published newsletters over the course of the last year and talk about some of the things that they're seeing. Symantec says that web attacks are up by 50% in 2018, and of course this was a paper they published at the beginning of 2019. Form jacking has been occurring at an average of 4,800 sites compromised each month. Ransomware has declined by 20%, But I feel that this is misleading a little bit in that the ransomware attacks, which were being pointed at individuals previously, have now moved to companies and other governmental agencies in order to get larger payouts. Poorly configured Amazon S3 buckets, not having passwords or having something configured incorrectly, which allows access, unintentional access. Crypto jacking has dropped by 52% in 2018, and that's probably because of the price of coins and the value of those coins have declined overall in 2018. If that suddenly turns around, I suspect crypto jacking will come back up again. Living off the land has increased by 1,000%. Now, I don't necessarily like percentage numbers because we don't really know how many attacks that really was, but it is clear that that fileless-based attacks are becoming a favorite way to gain access into systems. No denying that. Supply chain remains at a soft target, and that has increased by over 78% in 2018. IoT devices are the most vulnerable, and that has been the case for a number of years and remains so. That, of course, was Symantec's 2019 Threat Report, Volume 24, if you want to look that up. RSA, which is both a software and a hardware provider of security and authentication solutions, both in single and multi-factor. And they have indicated, of course, that we've seen this domain name jacking has increased, and it's a issue that alters the DNS routing path to a attacker's site, and that's called DNS espionage. It can also be used to man in the middle, to sit and just exfiltrate data as it comes across from one site of yours to another. Domain fronting allows the attacker to embed their command and control structures inside of an existing TLS connection. So typically that would be, they would occupy, if you were on, let's say, Amazon or on Google, then they would place their systems pretty close to yours. And that would allow them to exfiltrate data from your site and just send it across the TLS channel, so it makes it very hard to detect that something has happened. Now, both Amazon and Google claim that this is fixed, but they're not the only CDNs, and so it is not fixed. So it may be fixed for Amazon and Google, but it's not fixed for others, so it's still a problem. Targeted individual attacks for mobile devices. These are kind of tough ones to find. It tracks where you are. It takes over not only your phone device, but any other device that is able to mimic the behavior of your device, or bypass or access based on trust that you've given your phone. My advice here is that you might want to check your data policy and security policy for your phone, and just go through a checkup on that every once in a while. Make sure that the type of data that you're beaconing is something that you really want to happen, because that it usually is unintentional. Data delivery is usually the cause for that. DNS over HTTPS has been a popular topic in the last few months. One of the problems, I mean, it's a good thing to do on one hand in order to have the DNS traffic secured, but one of the problems with that is that it removes one of the largest base tools that security folks have for determining if there is a probe or an active attack underway. Because if you encrypt the metadata for the DNS information, then it's hard to determine where that's coming from. So tools, for example, Snort, which use blacklists to block sites and access to sites, wouldn't work anymore if DNS over HTTPS was being used. Be one example. Or would not work as well. Let's put it that way. Also, CPU flaws and other hardware flaws. Now, of course, the most famous one of those was Spectre and Meltdown. But there are other ones, and we have seen some of those in the baseboard management controllers, such as the lights out controllers that are used and usually attached to management networks. And a lot of people think that just having it connected to the management network, oh, that's fine, it's cool, no problem. But if someone is able to jump from a site that has a lights out controller in it, able to jump from there to the lights out controller, guess what? They now have access to your management network and all the machines attached to it. So that's a problem. Wi-Fi and Bluetooth chips have had vulnerabilities recently, and it continues to occur. Also, Thunderbolt chips have also had vulnerabilities in that they allow data to be read directly out of memory. Cisco, what they're talking about here is a good thing. This, of course, would be the other half of encrypting data at rest, data in flight. So this would be the data in flight part. 75% of the web traffic is encrypted, and 80% of the enterprise traffic is encrypted. That's a great trend. It needs to go to 100%, but that's still a great trend. AI and machine learning is increasing in both uses for monitoring and detection, both versus humans, and we'll talk about that more a little bit later. Internet of Things, Internet of Everything, they're being deployed without any regard to security, without any thought to the implications and consequences of their use, and I think that backlash is going to be pretty significant, and it has been in some cases. Cloud insecurity, that's data being deployed by disparate parts of an organization. Each department may set up their own cloud server, and they don't have a common security policy. So one may implement good security controls, the other one may not. And since the weakest link in any chain is the one without security controls, then the organization as a whole may suffer. So you need security policies across the board. Also, a group of CISOs which get together periodically. I think they meet every quarter or so, and they talk about problems and threats that they have been seeing, and also trends. But one of the good things is that the C-level executives and other key leaders in their organizations have finally started to recognize security as a key business risk. DDoS continues to grow along with the cost to defend against it. Shadow IT, this has been a problem for a while. These are systems which have gotten lost in the enterprise's inventory. They're still running. They're not being updated. They contain applications which are old, operating systems which are old, drivers that are old, and of course they are a vulnerability to the organization. Since they're forgotten about and neglected, they're very hard, of course, to detect. And so that is a problem. So that needs to be tracked down and found. IoT again, businesses also are realizing that the weak link in the chain is their users. One of the things that I really hope is that while that may be true, is that they don't come cracking down on the users too hard. You don't want to create a chilling effect where the users refuse to report the incident because of fears of reprisals or being fired. So hopefully they don't go too far with that. I mean, if a user clicks on a phishing email or goes to a website, then deal with it as a security issue, but and maybe get that user into a remedial training program and try once again to explain to them not to do. Ransomware again, cryptojacking again are also issues listed. Single-factor passwords, they should be moving to two-factor or even multi-factor, and probably two-factor is probably only going to be good for a few more years. There are already vulnerabilities showing up in it. Multi-factor is probably going to be the next step, even though there are vulnerabilities showing up in it as well. So I don't know what the long-term answer here is, but clearly something needs to be done to make this simpler and to make the locks more secure. Cloud insecurity and lack of security policies over the entire CDN space, we've talked about that already. The GDPR is having an effect on C-levels and business leaders, and the fear of fines and penalties, which some of them are quite high. Nation-state cyber attacks are focusing on companies and infrastructure, not just governmental agencies. So they are now coming after the company and the base of the infrastructure to attack. So those are on the rise as well. There's some scenarios. These are hypotheticals, and scenarios are always interesting because they help us learn about some ways of a future possibility, and then how to come up with some resolutions to those scenarios to try to minimize their effect if they were to happen. There are 4 scenarios that the cyberfutures2025.org group have. There's quantum leap, new wiggle room, Bartle's revenge, and trust us. I'm not really going to spend a lot of time on this. You're welcome to go to the site. They have a number of videos with each of those talking about some of the problems that they see as new security guidelines or new data guidelines are published. Some other things to know. 2-factor is a good idea for now, as we have said, but there are vulnerabilities exposed by security researchers. Hardware, 2-factor or multi-factor is good, but don't leave your keys in your computer. There have been some keys from Google and Yubico, like the FIPS version of Yubico, that have had recent vulnerabilities. So if you do go that route, make sure you pay attention to those sites so that you can get an updated key in the event they do find. And it's good that they are finding the vulnerabilities, and it's also good that they're stepping up to fix them. Also, I keep hearing this one a lot. You set a long password. The NIST used to recommend that. They don't anymore. So, and they've just found that people have a bad habit. Once you get past a certain number of characters, they write it down, and so that's very bad. So, or they forget, and then they start using the "I forgot my password" as a mechanism to gain access to their site. So that's also a vulnerability because you're sending keys that allow access or personally identifiable information that's being sent across the network, possibly even into your SMS or your email box. And so those are not good things to be doing. So the NIST no longer recommends that. So if you're saying that to use long passwords, that's not good advice. Don't do that. Other things to know. You should be going multi-factor or 2-factor. Other things to know. Storing passwords and keys in the cloud. This is great. Just realize that that makes those companies a target because the larger the base of information that an attacker has to go after, guess what? They will. Also, the cryptographic keys are being stored on the same CDN as they are protecting. I know that that is usually the case with most of the security software, but don't do that. Keep your keys off of the same server they are protecting. Because once they gain access to the server, they also gain access to all your keys. Run security checkups. Google offers some. I think Apple has one as well, and I know Microsoft does. So go run those occasionally and make sure that you're not exposing data that you really didn't intend to. That changes all the time on their part. And in the case of Facebook, it always locks to open, so you're always exposing data that you really don't want to. So make sure that if you do that, if you happen to use Facebook, go check those every once in a while and make sure that you're not exfiltrating data that you didn't intend. And that brings up, don't expose personal data in social media, because that kind of information, like your mother's maiden name or your grandmother's name, can be used to gain the same information. Where you grew up, what the name of your first pet was. Those are all used by organizations as questions to protect your password reset. Other things to know. Encrypt data in flight and data at rest. And encrypting your hard drive is not encrypting data at rest. That is really meant to protect a laptop that is being transported with the lid down and the power off. It prevents someone from booting the computer. But once you've entered a cryptographic key at the boot prompt, your data is unencrypted. So encrypted at rest, that requirement is not met solely by encrypting the hard drive. It means encrypting the data as it is stored on your drive. And it also means that if you have data inside of a database, that data is also encrypted inside of the database. Reliance, enough on that really. Reliance on AI machine learning to monitor security is increasing. AI is another layer of complex software. AI introduces a new set of threat vectors into the landscape. We just recently saw this with Cylance, where the machine learning algorithm was defeated by injecting a set of game signatures. It fooled the MI into thinking that the malware was fine and went ahead and let it run. So, so AI, it can be fooled. Yes, it's software just like everything else. And the other part is AI can rewrite itself, and an attacker could potentially attack that part of AI as well. And so if you're using AI to monitor security, you really think that, and that's the only mechanism of monitoring, you really think that's a good idea? I don't. But I think it's a great tool. It's another great tool to have on the shelf, but don't make it your only one. So some of my random thoughts, we keep making the same mistakes over and over again. Ransomware first appeared in 1989. That was before there was really a ubiquitous internet. Those appeared on floppy disks back then. And it used a similar method that Petya uses, and that is, instead of course, going and paying a Bitcoin, the 1989 virus, I forget the name of the AIDS, I think it was on an AIDS floppy disk, but it just said wire transfer this money to a P.O. box in Panama. But it was the same thing, and it ran for a while, then it encrypted your files. So that's been around for a while, and we keep having that same kind of a problem where we allow stuff to take over our machines without thinking what we're doing when we go click on links. Also, I would recommend that if you do learn, of course this isn't the course for learning security, but as you learn and become an expert in computer security, pay it forward. Go teach a class. Go give a presentation to a junior college and help spread the word out to other users so they understand what are the threats, what are the things that I can do to help protect myself. I think the third thing is that the current security defense strategies are totally fragmented. They seem to me to be more of a knee-jerk reaction. Oh, I've had this problem, I'll fix that problem. Oh, I've had that problem, I'll fix that problem. And so I end up with a handful of, instead of a handful of tools, I end up with thousands and thousands of tools, thousands and thousands of ways to monitor for problems, and that's not good because it's going to get expensive because you're going to have something sit there and look at all the logs that are coming in. Second, if you're monitoring for breaches, you're too late. I mean, if it's forensics is great as a tool to determine what happened, but it's not a tool to protect your organization. And so that is, you've left the door open, someone got in, they stole your stuff. It's good to call the police and find out what they took and maybe start looking for the perpetrator, but it's too late. You're done. Your data is out. So I think it needs to be as easy as locking the front door. I think it needs to be that simple instead of all these fragmented tools. I just don't think that's the right thing. I know that there are many different vectors, but I think if we all sat down in a room and figured it out, we could probably do it a lot better than we're doing it right now. That is for sure. Some other things. Yes, pen testing. Absolutely, you should do it. You want to find out if you got vulnerabilities ahead of time, not after the fact. So yes, by all means, pen test your applications, your infrastructure, your networking, your firewalls, your LDAP servers, everything in your organization that's attached. Make every assurance you can that someone has certified and said, yep, I don't think you have any vulnerabilities, or here are the vulnerabilities we found, here are the corrections we made, here's the next result of the pen test. I mean, that at least gives you some peace of mind that you've done the right thing. The other thing, as you deploy software, recheck again, and also make sure that you're checking that software as well, and any software that is being deployed along with it, to try to reduce the amount of risk. It's all about the reduction of risk. You're not going to eliminate it. You're just trying to reduce it. Security, of course, and that brings up the next point. It's a balance between cost and level of risk. And that's the way the C-levels will see it. So as laws get passed, then the risk factor goes up, and so they're willing to spend more to do that. So that's a good thing, I think, in the long run, and I hope that continues. The other thing is back up. Make sure that if you back up, though, that you follow the 3 backup or how many ever backup strategies you want to follow. Don't leave those backup systems online. Once you've done a backup, take them offline. Also, if you're sending the backups off-site, make sure that they're locked down and not available to someone that it would be a potential break-in. And make sure you're doing rotations fairly frequently. One of the reasons why we used tape back in the day was it was a lot easier to carry those off-site. But a hard drive or even a SSD that's large enough can certainly be used to store critical files and keep them off-site and move them around in order to keep them current. So don't neglect that. Never neglect that. There's other reasons besides security, and that is, what if your business burns down? What are you going to do then? So some quotes. If you reveal your secrets to the wind, you shouldn't blame the wind for revealing them to the trees. And so that'd be like, don't blame Facebook for sending your data over to Amazon or Google. That's your fault. You're the one that exposed it. So, also, if you're visiting social engineering sites or social sites, or I should say social media sites, they're really social engineering sites. If you are visiting those, close your browser after you've been there, because you will carry a tracking cookie with you when you leave. And that will track everything you do from that time forward. Computer security software has never improved security performance. That's so true. That always slows things down. However, if that is a concern, there are third-party devices. I don't know if I trust the ones that are inside my CPU, but there are also security accelerators there for cryptography. So if you are using cryptography a lot, you might consider putting those devices on your server. They do speed things up quite a bit. Computer security is always excessive until it's not, and that means it's never excessive until there's a breach and you're the guy that's standing in the spotlight because it failed. Wouldn't want to be in your shoes, and so you don't want it to happen. That's all I'm going to say. You don't want it to happen. The ultimate security is your understanding of reality. And with that, I think what I'd like to do is invite you to the next one, and I'll try to go through some of the tools you can use to, first of all, do an assessment of kind of where you are, and how to conduct that assessment yourself. Now, that is not the tool you should use to say, "Oh, I'm done." No, it's a start. It's a good place to start. There are kind of several different rules of thought when you're doing security. First, when you're setting up a new server, you don't connect it to any network until you have it hardened and ready to go on the network. That's the paranoid version of that. And anyway, with that, I will leave you. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. I would love to hear from you, and hope to see you again real soon. And bye for now.